In pursuance of their design of seeking out an astrologer, Maurice Wyville and Lydiard crossed Cheapside and entered Friday Street. They had not proceeded far, when they perceived a watchman standing beneath a porch with a lantern in his hand, and thinking it an intimation that the house was attacked by the plague, they hurried to the opposite side of the street, and called to the watchman to inquire whether he knew where Mr. Lilly lived. Ascertaining that the house they sought was only a short distance off, they repaired thither, and knocking at the door, a small wicket, protected by a grating, was opened within it, and a sharp female voice inquired their business. "Give this to your master, sweetheart," replied Wyville, slipping a purse through the grating, "and tell him that two gentlemen desire to consult him." "He is engaged just now," replied the woman, in a much softer tone, "but I will take your message to him." "You have more money than wit," laughed Lydiard. "You should have kept back your fee till you had got the information." "In that case I should never have received any," replied Wyville. "I have taken the surest means of obtaining admission to the house." As he spoke, the door was unbolted by the woman, who proved to be young and rather pretty. She had a light in her hand, and directing them to follow her, led the way to a sort of anteroom, divided, as it appeared, from a larger room by a thick black curtain. Drawing aside the drapery, their conductress ushered them into the presence of three individuals, who were seated at a table strewn with papers, most of which were covered with diagrams and astrological calculations. One of these persons immediately rose on their appearance, and gravely but courteously saluted them. He was a tall man, somewhat advanced in life, being then about 63, with an aquiline nose, dark eyes, not yet robbed of their luster, grey hair waving over his shoulders, and a pointed beard and mustache. The general expression of his countenance was shrewd and penetrating, and yet there were certain indications of credulity about it, showing that he was as likely to be imposed upon himself as to delude others. It is scarcely necessary to say that this was Lilly. The person on his right, whose name was John Booker, and who, like himself, was a proficient in astrology, was so buried in calculation that he did not raise his eyes from the paper on the approach of the strangers. He was a stout man, with homely but thoughtful features, and though not more than a year older than Lilly, looked considerably his senior. With the exception of a few silver curls hanging down the back of his neck, he was completely bald, but his massive and towering brow seemed to indicate the possession of no ordinary intellectual qualities. He was a native of Manchester, and was born in 1601, of a good family. His excellent verses upon the 12 months, says Lilly, in his autobiography, framed according to the configurations of each month, being blessed with success according to his predictions, procured him much reputation all over England. He was a very honest man, continues the same authority, abhorred any deceit in the art he studied, had a curious fancy in judging of thefts, and was successful in resolving love questions. He was no mean proficient in astronomy, understood much in physic, was a great admirer of the antimonial cup, and not unlearned in chemistry, which he loved well, but did not practice. At the period of this history, he was clerk to Sir Hugh Hammersley, alderman. The third person, a minor canon of St. Paul's, named Thomas Quatermain, was a grave, sallow-complexioned man, with a morose and repulsive physiognomy. He was habited in the cassock of a churchman of the period, and his black velvet cap lay beside him on the table. Like Booker, he was buried in calculations, and though he looked up for a moment as the others entered the room, he instantly resumed his task, without regard to their presence. After looking earnestly at his visitors for a few moments, and appearing to study their features, Lilly motioned them to be seated, but they declined the offer. "I am not come to take up your time, Mr. Lilly," said Wyville, "but simply to ask your judgment in a matter in which I am much interested." "First permit me to return you your purse, sir, since it is from you, I presume, that I received it," replied the astrologer. "No information that I can give deserves so large a reward as this." Wyville would have remonstrated. But seeing the other resolute, he was fain to concede the point. "What question do you desire to have resolved, sir?" pursued Lily. Shall I be fortunate in my hopes? Rejoined Wyville. You must be a little more precise, returned the astrologer. To what do your hopes relate, to wealth, dignity, or love? To the latter, replied Wyville. So I inferred from your appearance, sir, rejoined Lily, smiling. Venus was strong in your nativity, though well dignified, and I should, therefore, say you were not unfrequently entangled in love affairs. Your inamorata, I presume, is young, perhaps fair, blue-eyed, brown-haired, tall, slender, and yet perfectly proportioned. She is all you describe, replied Wyville. Is she of your own rank? Asked Lily. Scarcely so, replied Wyville, hesitating before he answered the question. I will instantly erect a scheme, replied the astrologer, rapidly tracing a figure on a sheet of paper. The question refers to the 7th house. I shall take Venus as the natural significatrix of the lady. The moon is in trine with the lord of the ascendant, so far, good, but there is a cross aspect from Mars, who darts forth malicious rays upon them. Your suit will probably be thwarted. But what Mars bindeth, Venus dissolveth. It is not wholly hopeless. I should recommend you to persevere. Juggler, exclaimed Wyville between his teeth. I am no juggler, replied Lily, angrily, and to prove I am not, I will tell you who you are who thus insult me, though you have not announced yourself, and are desirous of preserving your incognito. You are the Earl of Rochester, and your companion is Sir George Etheridge. For heaven! We are discovered, cried the Earl, but whether by art, magic, or from previous acquaintance with our features, I pretend not to determine. In either case, my lord, for it is useless, since you have avowed yourself, to address you longer as Wyville, replied Etheridge, you owe Mr. Lilly an apology for the insult you have offered him. It was as undeserved as uncalled for he described your position with Amabel exactly. I am sorry for what I said, replied the Earl, with great frankness, and entreat Mr. Lilly to overlook it, and impute it to its real cause, disappointment at his judgment. I wish I could give you better hopes, my lord, replied Lily, but I readily accept your apology. Have you any further questions to ask me? Not tonight, replied the Earl, except that I would gladly learn whether it is your opinion that the plague will extend its ravages? It will extend them so far, my lord, that there shall neither be buriers for the dead, nor sound to look after the sick, replied Lily. You may have seen a little tract of mine published in 1651, some 14 years ago, called Monarchy or No Monarchy in England, in which, by an hieroglyphic, I foretold this terrible calamity. I heard His Majesty speak of the book no later than yesterday, replied Rochester. He has the highest opinion of your skill, Mr. Lilly, as he cannot blind himself to the fact that you foretold his father's death. But this is not the only visitation with which you threaten our devoted city. It is threatened by heaven, not by me, my lord, replied Lily. London will be devoured by plague and consumed by fire. In our time? Asked Etheridge. Before 2 years have passed over our heads, returned the astrologer. The pestilence originated in the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in Sagittarius, on the 10th of last October, and the conjunction of Saturn and Mars in the same sign, on the 12th of November. It was harbingered also by the terrible comet of January, which appeared in a cadent and obscure house, denoting sickness and death, and another and yet more terrible comet, which will be found in the fiery triplicity of Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, will be seen before the conflagration. My calculations are, that the plague will be at its worst in August and September, and will not cease entirely till the beginning of December, observed Booker, laying aside his pen. And I doubt not you are right, sir, said Lily, for your calculations are ever most exact. "My labor is not thrown away, Mr. Lilly," cried Quatermain, who had finished his task at the same time. "I have discovered what I have long suspected, that treasure is hidden in St. Paul's Cathedral. Mercury is posited in the north angle of the fourth house, the dragon's tail is likewise within it, and as soul is the significator, it must be gold." "True," replied Lilly. "Furthermore," proceeded Quatermain, "as the sign is earthy, the treasure must be buried in the vaults." "Undoubtedly," replied Booker. "I am all impatience to search for it," said Quatermain. "Let us go there at once, and make trial of the massical rods." "With all my heart," replied Lilly. "My lord," he added to Rochester, "I must pray you to excuse me. You have heard what claims my attention." "I have," returned the Earl, "and should like to accompany you in the quest, if you will permit me." "You must address yourself to Mr. Quatermain," rejoined Lilly. "If he consents, I can make no objection." The minor canon, on being appealed to, signified his acquiescence, and after some slight preparation, Lilly produced 2 hazel rods, and the party set out. A few minutes' walking brought them to the northern entrance of the cathedral, where they speedily aroused the poor verger, who began to fancy he was to have no rest that night. On learning their purpose, however, he displayed the utmost alacrity, and by Quatermain's directions went in search of his brother verger, and a mason, who, being employed at the time in making repairs in the chantries, lodged within the cathedral. This occasioned a delay of a few minutes, during which Rochester and Etheridge had an opportunity, like that enjoyed a short time before by Leonard Holt, of beholding the magnificent effect of the columned aisles by moonlight. By this time the other verger, who was a young and active man, and the mason, arrived, and mattocks, spades, and an iron bar being procured, and a couple of torches lighted, they descended to St. Faith's. Nothing more picturesque can be conceived than the effect of the torchlight on the massive pillars and low-browed roof of the subterranean church. Nor were the figures inappropriate to the scene. Lilly, with the massical rods in his hand, which he held at a short distance from the floor, moving first to one point, then to another, now lingering within the gloomy nave, now within the gloomier aisles, the grave minor canon, who kept close beside him, and watched his movements with the most intense anxiety, Booker, with his venerable head uncovered, and his bald brow reflecting the gleam of the torches, the 2 court gallants in their rich attire, and the vergers and their comrade, armed with the implements for digging, all constituted a striking picture. And as Rochester stepped aside to gaze at it, he thought he had never beheld a more singular scene. Hitherto, no success had attended the searchers. The massical rods had continued motionless. At length, however, Lilly reached a part of the wall where a door appeared to have been stopped up, and playing the rods near it, they turned one over the other. "The treasure is here," he exclaimed. "It is hidden beneath this flag." Instantly, all were in action. Quatermain called to his assistants to bring their mattocks and the iron bar. Rochester ran up and tendered his aid, Etheridge did the same, and in a few moments the flag was forced from its position. On examination, it seemed as if the ground beneath it had been recently disturbed, though it was carefully trodden down. But without stopping to investigate the matter, the mason and the younger verger commenced digging. When they were tired, Lilly and Quatermain took their places, and in less than an hour they had got to the depth of upwards of 4 feet. Still nothing had been found, and Lilly was just about to relinquish his spade to the mason, when, plunging it more deeply into the ground, it struck against some hard substance. "It is here, we have it," he cried, renewing his exertions. Seconded by Quatermain, they soon cleared off the soil, and came to what appeared to be a coffin or a large chest. Both then got out of the pit to consider how they should remove the chest. The whole party were discussing the matter, when a tremendous crash, succeeded by a terrific yell, was heard at the other end of the church, and a ghastly and half-naked figure, looking like a corpse broken from the tomb, rushed forward with lightning swiftness, and shrieking, my treasure, you shall not have it!" thrust aside the group, and plunged into the excavation. When the bystanders recovered sufficient courage to drag the unfortunate sexton out of the pit, they found him quite dead.